And welcome back into the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We are back here on Monday. Just about, George, 24 hours between now and the roster cut down day. A lot of questions, a lot of interesting decisions the Colts do have to make. And let's get right into it, George, with the big decision. Not only is Tuesday roster cut down day, it is also the unofficial reported deadline for a Jonathan Taylor trade to go down. So let's start right there at running back, George. Tuesday, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Is Jonathan Taylor on the 53-man roster for the Colts, or is he somewhere else?
I'm still going to go with no. I think he's somewhere else. I think I think it's Miami. I think it's going to end up being Miami. I think they've made the best offer from all accounts. Nobody's made an offer that meets what the Colts put out there. I don't think anybody really thought they were going to get a first-round pick. But it does sound like Miami has made the best offer of the bunch. And as I've said for a while now, I think it's time for a divorce here.
I still am going to say yes. I think he's on the roster. I don't think the Colts are actually truly intending to trade him, let alone I don't think that they're going to actually get the offer they want. We do not know what Miami's first offer that was rejected was. It could have been a 2. It could have been a 5 and a bag of footballs for all we know, right? They try to maybe buy low. And the Colts and Chris Ballard did not bite, at least on attempt number 1. But also, too, George, it seems like right now, at least, again, 24 hours before this deadline, quote unquote, it seems like it's Miami and no one else. So right now, if anything, the Dolphins are bidding against themselves. The Bears have been reportedly out. Other teams, Jerry Jones on the record saying we don't need Jonathan Taylor. A lot of teams that may be called early have seemingly not been that aggressive in terms of making a trade, again, outside the Dolphins. I just don't see a situation where the Colts are going to get the price they want and Jonathan Taylor is going to get the new deal that he does desire and have it, and have this go. But also, I don't see a team like Miami, for example. I don't think they'd give up a first-round pick and then possibly risk Jonathan Taylor leaving next year anyway if they don't get a new deal done. So I just think at this point, I think there's too many factors working against a trade going down. I do think Jonathan Taylor will be on the 53-man roster when tomorrow or when Tuesday does come. Do you expect him to be off PUP?
Who knows? I think that's one of the big questions where it goes. I mean, if he's still here, that's why I keep saying the trade just needs to happen. There's no relationship between the player and the team right now, from everything I've heard. There is no mending offenses. It's not gotten better since the bus. It's not moved forward. There's been no progress. That's why I keep saying they need to trade him. And I know they're not going to get a first round pick. And I know a lot of people are going to be angry about that, but going through this whole process, if he starts season on PUP, is he ever going to play? If he does play, I've been talking about it, for the last couple of weeks. The circus that's going to come with him, I just don't think is with it. Now, maybe, the Colts have had the circus tents up for a while. The 3-ring circus has been in effect here for a while. Maybe they're okay with it. Maybe they feel like, what they've been through the last 18 months or so, Jonathan Taylor just be another blip in that. They can keep working on it, try to get things better. But right now, if he is on the 53-man roster, well, he won't be if he's on PUP. He could definitely start on PUP. Those 4 games, it would be 4 games he'd have to sit out. It wouldn't harm him, in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. I know there's the school of thought out there, as we talked about before, that he should sit out and only play the last 8 games of the year. I think that's an awfully risky thing for him to do. And I think it's making a lot of assumptions. I mean, if the team's better than you expect them to be and you're sitting out, you're not going to get the result that you want. If you get back and you don't look good because you haven't done anything since December, you're not going to get the results that you want. But all I know is right now, everything I've heard, the relationship between the player and the team remains awful.
Yes, it is not great. The one thing that can solve that, especially right now in the interim, is money. Look at Josh Jacobs, who just recently, again, renegotiated his franchise tag. He's now getting a little bit more money. Now he's back with the Raiders. Saquon Barkley, same thing with the Giants. This is my hope, George, at this point, basically on Tuesday, is this. Chris Ballard and Jonathan Taylor are in a room together. This is what happened. They say, look, the market, JT, you thought your market was going to be better than it was. Clearly, it's not. We're not going to trade you. We have not gotten an offer yet that we feel is good. You also saw that there's not a lot of teams truly willing to give up a lot in order to get you and give you the contract you want. So we both now have to at least put this, put everything behind us. And frankly, the best thing for both of us is to work together for this year. So here's what we're going to do. You make it $4.3 million a year. We'll give you $3 or $4 million extra on top of that. Come back, play for us. Here's $8 million, and we'll revisit everything at the end of the year. That's what's the best case for JT. That's what the best case is for the Colts, right? The Colts are a better team with Jonathan Taylor on the field.
Sure.
And Jonathan Taylor is going to get more money in his pocket from either the Colts or someone else at maybe the end of this year if he's on the field and playing well. And so to me, Georgia, it just makes too much sense at this point why they wouldn't work together and why they wouldn't realize, even if there's tension, and like I said, there is tension, right? There's a lot of, right now, we'll say hatred between the two sides. At the end of the day, though, working together and maybe adding a little money on top of, again, his already current salary, I think is the best case for JT in the terms of he's not going to get a better deal, obviously. Right now, if you're the Colts, yes, having Jonathan Taylor's maybe disgruntled on the team is not the best, but it's also better than giving away for nothing. And at least if you give him some money, I think he'll be less disgruntled, at least being motivated to earn a little bit more money at the end of the year. And again, kick the can down the road to January. Revisit talks, maybe work out a trade situation then where a team is, feels a little bit better about trading for you after they see a big 2023 season, let's say. I just think it just makes too much sense on both sides.
Yeah, I don't think there's much budge on either side. I don't think he wants to play for anyone on a 1-year deal here or elsewhere. And I don't think the Colts want to give him any money this year or in the future. So we'll see. I could be wrong, but as long as this has gone on, it just seems that they're both dug in. I don't think there's any leeway here. That's why I keep saying a trade. It's why my stance is that the trade is going to happen. I just don't think there's any future with the Colts and Taylor. But, stranger things have happened.
Let's just say I'm right, because for the roster spot, too, that it makes this conversation a little bit more compelling. If he's not on the roster, obviously there's really no discussion. If I'm right, Jonathan Taylor's on the roster, George, let's say the Colts carry 4 running backs. The other 3 in no order, right? Deion Jackson, would you say Zach Moss and Evan Hull? Would those be the 4 guys along with Jonathan Taylor that you think is going to be on the opening 53?
Yeah, I mean, those are the 3 guys that have gotten the most run. Obviously, with him out, Moss is hurt, so he hasn't gotten a whole lot lately. But they're hopeful that he's going to be ready to go week 1, and I think in all likelihood he's going to start that game. I mean, even if Taylor is somehow on the roster, and even if he is off PUP, I still think there's a decent chance that Moss starts, just because Moss has been there in the spring. Yeah, he broke his arm early in camp, and he's missed some time then. But again, Jonathan Taylor has not done anything significant on a football field since December. So, for me, he does get back. I think week 2 is best case scenario. They do find a way to reach some kind of agreement, and he's going to play this year in Indianapolis. I can't see him coming out starting week 1. I just don't think you're going to be able to get him to a point where he's fit enough. And, part of the thing for him is going to be concerned about being injured. So I don't think he's going to come out here at 75 or 80%. He's going to wait till he's fully ready to go. And I don't think 2 weeks is going to be enough to get that done. We'll see.
That's interesting. I didn't think about it, I guess, from that perspective. You're probably right. Even if he's off PUP by Tuesday, I mean, it's been over 9 months basically since the last time he's been on a football field. So you're right. There's definitely going to be a big ramp up period for sure. But otherwise, like Jake Funk has not done enough. Like Evan Hull's, I think, impressed. Deion Jackson as well has done, well in his role. That seems to be the makeup, at least for the running back room. Again, assuming Jonathan Taylor is on the team to start the season and is off PUP as well. One of the interesting battles, George, is at wide receiver, right? We know the top 4 is locked in set. Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Downs. It looks like, and we can think, maybe if you disagree with this projection, let me know. I would guess right now the Colts keep 5 receivers, 4 tight ends. Would you say that's a fair fair numbers to work with?
Yeah. I definitely think they're going to keep 6. I know they've done that the last few years, but I definitely don't think there's going to be 6 wide receivers. And the tight end room is pretty crowded. Even at 4, there's going to be somebody out of the mix there that's going to probably turn some heads.
Absolutely. So let's get to wide receiver first. Wide receiver spot number 5. Now, I've been kind of tinkering with this in preparation for the podcast. have had 3 different projections, Georgia, who will get the 5th wide receiver spot, and throughout Sunday night and Monday morning, at one point or another, they've been cut. Rashad Perriman, I thought could have had that. He's been cut. James Washington has been cut. We've also had, now Amari Rogers. Like, there's a lot of guys that are in the mix at 5th spot. Amari Rogers, Mike Strawn, Juwan Winfrey. Like, who would you say right now is the edge, and who you think will get the 5th and most likely final wide receiver spot?
My main guess is somebody who's not on the roster. I mean, I think it's somebody who's not here right now. I think it's a waiver claim. But for the guys that are here, I think I'm leaning towards Winfrey right now. He had the first touchdown catch of the preseason from Minshew against Chicago. He had some really good moments in the joint practices against the Bears. I think there's a sense that they might feel comfortable enough with him to go in that spot. It could be Strawn. I don't know how serious the injury is there, but he obviously hasn't practiced in about a week now. So if they feel like he's ready to go, it could be Strawn. And Rodgers is still on that periphery, but I think, you mentioned a while ago about Rodgers. I do think the fact that he's sort of that slot type probably is going to be held against him here, because you really do need somebody in that role. You've got Isaiah McKenzie there and Josh Downs, who can be a backup for one another. Whichever one of them starts, the other one's there, can fill that role. With Pierce and Pittman, I don't know who that next guy is. And so I think that's why you lean a little bit more towards Strawn or Winfrey. But I really think it's going to be somebody who's not here. We'll see how it turns out. But wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a waiver claim and the 5th wide receiver is a result of that.
Interesting. So you would say right now more likely it's someone not on the roster than a Juwan Winfrey, Mike Strawn type.
That's my gut feeling right now. I think they feel good about Winfrey. I think they feel, Strawn, they know what they've got there. With Strawn, a lot of it's health right now. He may end up on IR to start the year. I don't know how serious the injury is, how they feel like and how badly they feel like they need that 5th spot for week 1. That's there's so many things that come into this. We talk about special teams all the time, but health is a big part of it too. Because if you carry Mike Strawn, for instance, and he can't go week 1, then you really only have 4 receivers for week 1. So all these things play into it. And I think it'll be interesting to see what they do. That's why if it is somebody on the roster, that's why I kind of go towards Winfrey. Because again, I think with Strawn, it's health. And with Rodgers, I think it's the fact that he's more of a slot guy. Winfrey to me is the healthy outside guy. So if I have to pick somebody on the roster, I think it'll be him. And I think they feel comfortable that way. I just also believe there's a lot of deep wide receiver rooms around this league. There's a good chance somebody's going to get cut. They're 4th in the waiver wire. They may find somebody they like that way as well.
I will go with Winfrey as well in terms of making the roster at this point. Just like he fits what basically they need, where it's like, you're right. If right now you go Mike Strawn or you even go Amari Rogers, and Rogers obviously can't play really the outside. And if Strawn's hurt week 1, and let's just say, God forbid, Alec Pierce goes down with even like a twisted ankle. I mean, Johnny Woods is basically going to go on the outside and replace him, if you will, or you're going to run 3 tight ends most of the rest of the day. I think it's one of those where you truly are very thin on the outside. Winfrey fits that profile. Like I said, he's impressed and played well so far throughout training camp, preseason. I like Mike Strawn. I've rooted for him. It's just at this point, Georgia, at what point do you say, you know what? It's not going to work out. He's impressed in training camp. He's never been able to put it together and really crack the starting lineup or make some sort of impact in the regular season. Now he's banged up. Sometimes, unfortunately, those things just happen where the timing never kind of works out. Something always happens, and you just can never truly get the most out of the guy that you truly think can, be an impactful player. Just never works out. That's, I think, at this point with Strawn, I think where we are. I do think this is the end of the road in terms of, at least for making the team this year. So I'll go Winfrey for right now, being that 5th wide receiver. But I'm definitely interested to see waiver wire, especially because receiver is one of those positions in the league now, kind of like running back. There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of good ones. And like you mentioned, with how high the Colts are on the waiver wire and how deep a lot of these rooms are, there's going to be a surprise name or two that's, wow, that guy had, pretty solid, career, or was good in college. Like, I'm surprised he is, going, not making the team. Be able to get someone like that, especially if it's a veteran on the outside, could really definitely be something of interest to watch for as well. All right, so one half of that big kind of group to watch is done with receiver, both on Juwan Winfrey. Tight end is interesting. I think, George, you can go a bunch of different ways. And even yesterday, I'm playing around the numbers. I'm thinking about logic in my head and saying, what makes sense? What can we do here? What can we do there? My final projection is going to be this: 4 tight ends, I think, making the roster: Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods, Drew Ogletree, and I'm going to say Mo Alley Cox. I do think right now, I would say the odd man out being Will Mallory, just from the sense of I do think having a veteran in that room, with Mo Alley Cox being the longest tenure Colt, I do think that it's a benefit for a young offense, especially if Jonathan Taylor is not on the team. You do have a lot of guys that are still early in their careers, obviously with a rookie quarterback as well. I do think having a veteran, voice at these skill positions would benefit Richardson's development and kind of help him out as well. So that's why I'll go a little bit more of the veteran experience angle with Mo making the team, and Will Mallory, who's been, he's contributed. And honestly, the biggest thing for him, he's been healthy. That's been a room that's been really decimated this training camp with injuries. And it's been frustrating that a lot of them have not been able to get on the field or stay on the field once they get on the field. So I will say, end of the day, George, Mo Alley Cox, I think, does make the team, and the Colts go veteran presence over rookie. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I can see them trying to get Mallory onto the practice squad and hope that he slips through. He had the hamstring issues early and then dealt with that a little bit after he kind of had that comeback and get it again situation. But he's been out there for about a month now or thereabouts and done really well. I think they really see a lot of upside in him. I think that's what makes this so tough, because I think all 5 of those guys they really like, and they'd really like to keep all 5 of them. And maybe they can find a way to do that. I've seen them, maybe you keep 3 running backs and you keep 5 tight ends. I'm not sure how they're going to, swing that. But I still think I'm just keeping my eye on Mo, not just from a cut, but potentially a trade. Can you get a late round pick? We'll see where that goes. It'll be interesting to see. I know they talked a lot about his leadership this week. A couple times that we got Shane Steichen, and I think even Jim Bob Cooter yesterday was talking about, what a veteran presence he is and how important that is in the room. And I think that's definitely going to be a factor here. So I think they might keep 5. I don't know how they're going to find a way to do that, but I think it's something that I think they like all 5. They all bring something different to the table. They wouldn't obviously all 5 be active on game day, but again, you mentioned people being hurt. So, and that's going to come into this too. So with Jelani still last we saw, not ready to go, do you keep 5 and Jelani's inactive in week 1? There's so many elements here that come into play that I don't know. Right now, I guess I'm going to go with they find a way to keep 5.
And especially look at Mo Alley Cox, like the biggest thing he can bring to the table, and maybe arguably his best argument to stay on the team, is his blocking. Right, Jelani Woods, Drew Ogletree, Kylan Granson are, I would say, more receiving tight ends and more athletic, making plays in space than just like get down 3-point stance, end the line of scrimmage, be a 6th lineman and block. And again, there's been signs, Georgia, and maybe some progress on the offensive line. We're hoping for a bounce back year. Tony Sperano Jr. bringing some new energy and bringing maybe some new techniques that can help this offensive line rebound from what was a brutal and awful 2022. But also, George, like, you got to think about, if you're Shane Steichen, if you don't maybe get, especially early on, the returns you want on the offensive line, maybe you do go, 5 linemen and then put Mo Alley Cox on the end of the line of scrimmage and kind of run almost, if you will, like almost like a 6 lineman set, if you will, just to get some pressure or alleviate some pressure, I should say, and give Richardson a little more time if that's an area that, again, they're struggling to protect with.
I definitely think you'll see some jumbo packages out there with the extra tight ends. I think Ogletree's taken a big leap as a blocker this year. I think that's the one thing that they've really seen. I think it's one thing that's going to keep him here. But I don't know if they feel like he's taking a big enough leap to be ahead of Mo right now. That, that's been the best thing he's done, since he's been here. Blocking has been his most consistent role, what he's done best. So definitely it's not Granson's forte. I mean, he's more of a slot guy than anything. And it's not really Jelani Woods' forte either. So I mean, there's things Mo brings to this team element. I don't think Will Mallory's really a blocking tight end either. He's more of a receiving guy too. So a lot of it will come down to how comfortable they are with Ogletree. I know he took a lot of steps, uh, a lot of positive steps in the right direction, but he's still, from an experience standpoint, he's a rookie. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
play last year with the injury. And so there's a lot of unknown there, but they've also shown in a lot of positions this year, they're not afraid to go ahead and put inexperienced guys out there and live with it this year.
This is the year to do that, right? This is definitely the year to do that, to kind of basically have guys throw them in the deep end and see who can swim and who cannot. You mentioned before a possible Moe Cox trade. That's, you got to keep an eye on. Forget about making the team or not getting cut. Maybe it could be a trade piece either tomorrow or even after the deadline as well. I wonder, George, you mentioned draft pick. I wonder if that's a possible trade bait for an offensive lineman, some offensive lineman depth. Because you look, a player for a player trade, because as you go to offensive line, obviously we know the 5 starters, if healthy, are going to be from left to right: Raymond, Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Braden Smith. The issue, George, right, for this team is going to be depth. It has been, to put it nicely, horrendous behind those starting 5. You have Arlington Hambright. I think it's been a bright spot. No pun intended there. And Blake Freeland has been solid as well, especially early on when he filled in for Braden Smith when Braden Smith was dealing with an injury. But it's like, George, outside of that, so I would say 7 linemen right now you feel relatively good about making the roster. I would argue, especially with the Danny Pinter injury now, where he's out for the year, unfortunately, after fracturing his ankle in that preseason finale on Thursday. I would argue, George, you cut everyone else, and that is waiver wire claims. That is maybe a trade or two as well. Like, this depth, especially on the offensive line, I think it'd be totally overhauled outside of those 7 guys we just talked about.
This is definitely the position that could look the most different on Wednesday or even Thursday after, I guess, the claims come Wednesday. So, this could be the most different looking position on the roster. It's the one spot where they could even conceivably get a starter. I mean, it's not out of the question that they get a right guard in here that goes right to the top of the depth chart. But definitely the depth, maybe keep Dan Skipper. He's the other guy. I think that he's got some pelts in the league. So maybe he sticks around just so you have a veteran tackle. But again, there might be somebody out there that you feel better about on the waiver wire that you can bring in and get a similar result. So I expected to see at least 1 and maybe 2 offensive line claims, or maybe a situation like you said, where maybe Mo is dealt for offensive line depth, or maybe a depth lineman is involved in a potential Jonathan Taylor trade. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get another body in here. And I think they're going to have to explore those avenues and, do their best to make it happen, honestly.
It's frustrating, George. Like, this should not be a position that's being addressed on cut day, depth wise, at least. Like, I know we've talked about it a lot, but now it's like, now you're again seeing it come to the forefront, where you see the depth now being a real issue. You're seeing depth now also, get whittled away with now Will Fries having an injury, Danny Painter's out for the year. So what was already thin depth is now becoming even worse. And it's just like, why Chris Ballard sat on his hands. Forget about getting a starter maybe, or bringing in some legit competition, just bringing in some guys that could play if you get hurt. Like, the NFL is literally a war of attrition, George. That's essentially what it boils down to the most. If you are healthy, you are going to win more than you're not. And so it's just like the fact that you got to almost every year budget for injuries, and how like Chris Ballard just going in thinking, oh, these 5 guys are going to start all year long. We don't got to worry about upgrading our backup center and making sure we got a good swing tackle. It's not a rookie that can kind of step in and bring some competence if someone is struggling and or gets hurt. Why it didn't happen, George, is mind-blowing. But again, here we are paying the price on now where we're talking about cut day, maybe making a move or two, being active on the waiver wire to bolster this depth when it really should have been done in March and April.
Absolutely. I mean, that to me is the biggest surprise of the offseason. If you told me back in January that the only really offensive line moves that they're going to basically run it back, but the only really additions were going to be a couple of third-day draft picks, I would never have, no way that will not happen. That to me was the most shocking outcome of the whole offseason. And we'll see where it goes now. I mean, I know he's probably not panicking, Chris Ballard, because they've had some luck at this time of year before. I mean, Matt Pryor was a waiver claim guy when he first came in that first year, played a lot of positions. gave them exactly the kind of guy they're looking for right now. That kind of a thing. Mark Lewinsky wasn't at the waiver wire, but he was off the waivers in like November, December, the year before he really came in and made a big splash. So I mean, they have found guys this way before who have come in and played well for them, or at least given them good quality depth. But it still seems dangerous to kind of rely on that to kind of bank on it. It'll be interesting, I think, to see how this plays out, because for what I mean, right now, I don't know who the backup center is. Well, I do. I mean, it's Wesley French, but you're talking about a guy without any snaps in an NFL regular season game. That's not going to give a lot of comfort to anyone. Certainly not your rookie quarterback. So, and that's not a knock on Wesley French. It's just, I don't think any team really wants to feel like, okay, an undrafted guy who's never played a snap in the NFL is one snap away from, being my center. That's kind of where they are right now.
And also, George, I mean, look, I get injuries can happen on any play. So you could be in the best shape of your life, and first snap of week one, something goes wrong, you hurt something, you're out for the year. So I get just because you're healthy now, does that mean you'll be healthy even again one play into the season? But it's not like Ryan Kelly is super healthy anyway. This is a guy that's been nursing injuries and in and out of line the last week or so in training camp. So you already have a guy that's dealing with injuries and probably most likely at least if he's playing week one, banged up going into it. So now again, like your antennas should have already been up on the sense of, oh, wow, like now he's, our center is dealing with something. Like you said, now you're truly one hit away from Wesley French, snapping the ball to Anthony Richardson and being, corner protections and being a main influence on that offensive line. That is concerning. And even if you are able to bring someone in, bring in some talent, it's still, George, we're talking about a week and a half roughly to get that backup center acclimated and used to playing with Anthony Richardson, learning the calls, learning the protections. That's a lot to learn even in a small time period where, again, God forbid, if Ryan Kelly gets hurt and has to leave, sure, it's a talent upgrade compared to Wesley French if you're able to pick someone up as backup center. But if he's, hesitating or, again, not totally comfortable in the playbook and the system, you're still playing with one hand time behind your back. And again, if it's Patrick Mahomes, if it's Joe Burrow, if it's Jalen Hurts, you can get away with that for a game or two maybe. But it's Anthony Richardson as a rookie quarterback making his debut or early in the season, it only magnifies and only leads to, again, his development getting hurt and leading to more bad things happening, which, again, this underscores why it's been so laissez-faire in terms of going after real depth and making this offensive line better than it should have been.
Yeah, it's baffling to me. I mean, all those things you said are absolutely true. And that's going to happen whoever they bring in. I mean, if there's swing tackle, if there's, somebody who can play either guard position, whoever comes in here is going to have a big learning curve. I think at center, it's even more pronounced because of all the responsibilities that fall on that guy's shoulders. But any of them, you figure there's going to be a ramping up period here that was unnecessary because you could have brought him in June or May. And they could have gone through all of this already. It's with a rookie quarterback, it's negligent. I don't think there's any other way to put it. And the fact that they did not put more resources into the offensive line, they did not, go out there, try harder to bolster the depth behind them. I don't think any other word for it than negligent.
We'll see. We will see. Very frustrating. That's obviously going to be a major area to keep an eye on as we do go. And if, again, you're on Twitter looking at guys getting cut between Monday and Tuesday, definitely keep your eye on offensive linemen out there that could be available for this team to grab. Finally, George, defensively, this is, I think, a little more cut and dry, a little more obvious, just because, again, for defense, we're more talking about who's going to get playing time and who's going to be starting and not versus who's going to make the team or not. Tell me if I'm wrong here. I would probably argue the biggest name to watch is going to be in terms of making the roster or not, Titus Leo. Would you agree with that? And if so, what do you think his chances are right now? I think more likely he's on the team or not on the team.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think, you look around the rest of the roster, it feels like there's always a surprise here and there, but it feels like things are pretty well set on defense. There might be something in the middle of the defensive line that gets shook up a little bit, but to me, Titus Leo is the guy that came out, had a really good preseason, is at a premium position. I mean, when you're coming out the quarterback like that, that's what everybody wants. But you look at that defensive end depth chart right now. You got Kwity Paye, you've got Dio Dangbo, you've got Samson Ebukam, you've got Alquan Muhammad's back now. Taekwon Lewis is here. You know, where does he fit in? And some of those guys have position flexibility, which I think is important here. I think it's one of the reasons why we're not talking about Atterbury as well, you know, as being on the cut line. But I do think it's important to send a message to the locker room sometimes, you know, this guy earned it. And they're going to have that at corner. I mean, they're two starting corners right now, DJ Baker and Dallas Flowers earned it. You know, they came up the hard way and they went out there and they won the jobs. But I think it's important to kind of have that message sent to people that you come out here and you flash the way Titus Leo has, you're going to be rewarded for it. I'm just not sure where he fits in.
That's like, I like Titus Leo. I think he's had a good preseason. That's the frustrating part. Is you mentioned all the names. It's like, it's a tough lineup to crack in terms of especially defensive end, where it's not like you're obviously not cutting, you know, Kwity Paye. So it's not like one of those where it's just like a throwaway sort of position. Like they have put draft picks, they have put money into that position where, unfortunately for Titus Leo, that's just somewhere I just don't think the numbers break in his favor right now. And hopefully if you can, you know, if you do cut him and get back on the practice squad, because again, we've talked about attrition. That's a guy that I bet you will see the playing, you know, he'll see the field at some point this season. And maybe you can get him on later in the year. If, you know, again, if you're resting some starters or again, someone gets hurt, he could be a really good addition. That's where unfortunately for him, like, I don't think it's his doing. Like, he could have played much better to earn a spot. I just think especially when he was drafted and you look at the names in front of him, it's like, it's easy to say, oh, Titus Leo makes the team. But it's like, okay, well, Kwity Paye, Dio Dangbo, Samson Ebukam, Adebawore, like, there's really not any position for him to kind of crack to get in there.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, maybe you keep him instead of Muhammad. But it looks like Muhammad's been playing, you know, pretty far up in the depth chart. So that I think that would be a surprise at this point. And maybe can get him back on the practice squad because, like you said, I think if he is there, you just see it every year. You know, at some point you're going to need to call those guys up, and I think he's a guy who can help this team. I think he's a guy who, as you said, has probably done everything he can do to make this 53-man roster. But it's a numbers crunch sometimes, and it'll be interesting to see. I think that's a really, really interesting spot to watch, you know, over the next, 36 hours or so here.
So some breaking news for us in terms of just an update, just something that, you know, to finish off, I guess, at least what we started the podcast with, Jonathan Taylor and his future. You said he'll be traded. I said he will not be. Right now, Ian Rappaport, right, tremendous NFL insiders on Pat McAfee's show. And he is saying right now that he thinks it's more likely than not Jonathan Taylor is traded by Tuesday's deadline. And according to Rap Sheet, as long as the offer is good enough, he thinks a trade will probably get done. Let me ask you this really fast here. What is good enough? If you're Chris Ballard, what the reports are, they want a first-round pick or the equivalent of a first-round pick. In your mind, what pick would you get where you could say, you know what, that's good enough, let's make the trade?
Depends on what the whole package is. I think a second rounder with some other things, you know, some other picks and some players involved would probably be good enough. A third rounder might, depending on who the other players are. I think they're at a point, and I've been saying this for a while, I think they're at a point where they almost have to take whatever they get. I just feel like it's not tenable. It's not a situation anymore. Everybody knows that Taylor makes his football team better. Everybody knows that they're a better team on the field with him. But I just think it's gotten to a point where it's no longer a healthy situation for anybody involved. And I think they just got to move on. So, you know, if the Dolphins are going to offer a second round pick and maybe a player or two, or, you know, some other picks that are involved in there, I think you got to cut your losses and make the deal and start moving forward, you know, as an offense, because I think it's been holding things up all summer long. Everything that happens is, yeah, but what about Jonathan Taylor? Well, get that out of the equation and move forward with Zach Moss and Deion Jackson. And, you know, this is what you got, and go with it.
Like, I just looking at the depth behind Jonathan Taylor, if I'm Chris Ballard, I'm not settling on, again, I'm not trading if it's me. If you have to, I'm not taking anything less than a 2. I'm going to try to hold my ground. And honestly, George, I'm going to bet and I'm going to gamble that if I don't get my price and I keep him, that he will at least he will play this season and I think try. He's not going to tank, the season. He's not going to half-ass it. I would take that gamble. It's a risk. Like you said, a lot of people have been talking about it. You mentioned before that their relationship is untenable. It's fractured. It's really bad right now. I would take the risk of giving a little extra money and basically betting on that solving most of what your frustration is between now and at least the end of 2023. And then again, circling back, and that's a whole different conversation. I think a whole different exercise after the season. At least right now, I would prioritize Anthony Richardson's development. Know that this is the best version of this team is with Jonathan Taylor in this offense, and gamble that, you know what? If he's not traded, we're going to still make sure this is a situation where it's not going to be dramatic and it's not going to negatively impact the team here in 2023. I would take the risk, and you know what? If I get burned, I'll say this, George, for myself. I would not criticize Chris Ballard if he stands where he is, says, I want either a first round pick or the equivalent of it. That doesn't happen. He holds on to Jonathan Taylor. Even if things go south, JT doesn't play, makes us think about it, half-assing it. I won't fault Chris Ballard for not getting what he could and getting a third or a fourth round pick for Jonathan Taylor and just kind of moving on. I won't criticize him. I think that to me is a gamble. If it doesn't work out, I still think it's a good bet to make. So I still think the upside is higher for what you can accomplish with this offense and Richardson than the other side of the coin being you got a fourth round pick, a third round pick, and you hope you hit on it in 2024 and beyond. One other thing here I want to throw your way, because Ian Rappaport also, again, we know, right, Jonathan Taylor wants to get traded and get paid. At least according to Ian Rappaport and the people he's talking to, again, on the Pat McAfee show, he says he believes the final number or the number on average annual salary for Jonathan Taylor with a new deal, over $12 million. If you're the Colts, again, is that reportedly, he wanted 16. He wanted to be the highest paid or right up there, the highest paid running back. If we're talking about $12 million a year, is there an excuse, George, for the Colts not to pay that in your mind?
No, I was going to say, I don't want to throw any more misinformation out there because there's plenty of it out there. But if the number that I heard the other day is true, and if that's the number that they've been asking for all along, so I've heard that 16 million might have been never real, that might not have ever actually been something that was demanded of them. If the number that I heard is true, then the Colts are absolutely at fault here and should have made the deal in April. And we'll see what happens. If the trade happens and he signs for the number that I heard, then yeah, it's not good from the Colts. And I understand all the anger on Jonathan Taylor's side. But, we'll see how this plays out over the next day or two.
Are you allowed to say the number?
I just don't want to throw it out there because I don't want more misinformation. It's wrong. I don't want to add in there, but it is in the realm of what Rappaport's talking about today.
That's the franchise tag, basically. I know it's a little bit more, but that's.
Yep. We'll see what happens because, I'm assuming if he does get traded, there'll be a contract attached to that. I don't see it happening other way. Like I said, I don't think anyone's going to give up much for a guy who's not under contract. And I don't think Taylor's really going to want to go somewhere without a deal. I know he's mad here and I know he wants out of here, but I don't think he's also a smart kid. I don't think he's going to go somewhere else just to go through this again in January. I think he wants a deal as part of it. So, we may find out tomorrow. We'll see how that shakes out. I will let you know afterwards if it's the number I heard.
I swear, George. I've been on the team inside of paying Jonathan Taylor. If it truly is, again, because some of the numbers, if $60 million is a lot for a guy, again, coming off an injury and also currently injured, at least we believe he's injured, being on PUP, that's a lot of money. If it's in that $12 million ballpark, I am already very upset, George. My level of anger is going to go through the roof.
If it's a number I've heard, yeah, you're not gonna have a good day tomorrow if it comes in at that.
Unacceptable and inexcusable. Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun 24 hours. We'll say.
There's a tease for the next spot.
Holy, yeah, there's a tease.
Volcanic.
We have not cursed on this pod yet in the just over a year we've done it. Things could change, George. There's a first time for everything. That could change on Tuesday, depending on the news We do get. So that is, yes, that's a hell of a 24-hour tease. It's going to be a very, very interesting podcast, to say the least, when we are back late Tuesday, early Wednesday morning. So make sure you're downloading wherever you get your podcasts, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Subscribe on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Podcast as well. We will be back Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, to not only react to the final roster cuts and see who made the roster and who didn't, but also see towards, if Jonathan Taylor's traded, the return and the contract that the all-pro running back potentially could get. These next 24 hours are going to be, I think, a long one, to say at least here in Colts land. That is for sure. So I guess enjoy the next, few hours you got. We'll talk to you. I was going to say tomorrow, but we'll talk to you Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, right here on the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.